In this video, let's talk about an ASX growth stock you've been requesting non-stop, and that's Bubs Australia. Yes, your wishes do come true when you gently smash that like button right there. So, this is going to be a two-part series on my coverage on Bubs Australia. Now in part one, which is this video, I'm gonna cover three main things. The first thing is Bubs Australia's growth story and the numbers behind that story. Now the second thing in this video is going to be their economic moat, whether they have started to build the economic moat or whether I am seeing the development or glimpses of an additional moat. And the third thing is whether I think Bubs Australia can compete with A2 Milk moving forward into the future. In part two, I'm going to show you how I calculated the intrinsic value for Bubs Australia so that you can see all my assumptions and my data sets behind those assumptions. To make sure you have the most comprehensive view possible, I went through every single one of Bub's announcements since 2017, all of Christy Carr's YouTube interviews, and if you want to support me, just gently smash that like button right there and that will mean the world to me. So without further ado, let's go. Now for this segment of the video, I'm going to try my best to cover the key milestones over the last 3 years and how those milestones and story development have impacted Bub's financials. So let's start in 2017. Now when Bubs went public in January 2017, there are three major backings behind Bubs that's really worthwhile mentioning. The first is Yellowstone Capital, where a quarter of that investment company is owned by James Packer. Then you have the investment company of Nancy and Richard Liu. Richard is actually the founder of JD.com and Nancy is his wife. And third, you have Wattle Hill Capital, which is run by Albert Shear and also Jessica Rudd. Yeah, you heard that right. That's our former Prime Minister's daughter, which also happens to be an Australian ambassador for Alibaba. And Albert worked on the Agriculture Bank of China IPO in Hong Kong back in 2010, raising more than 22 billion US dollars, which allowed him to meet Jack Ma and a few other very influential Chinese families. Now, do you see the interconnectedness of all these relationships? Majority of the backing in Bubs are deeply influential in China. So if we look at the timeline for 2017, you can see that all of these major milestones in the 2017 financial year is distribution related. Coles, Costco, Chemist Warehouse, they're all very well-known brands that you already know. So instead, I'll focus on the international launches and partnerships. Now, Xiaohongshu.com will give Bubs access to 40 million Chinese customers who are actively discovering and purchasing international products based on recommendation on that platform. If you ever do get a chance to try that app for yourself, it honestly feels like a Chinese version of Pinterest, but with an e-commerce feel attached to it. Now, the strategic partnership with Kaola gives Bubs access to 15 million loyal customer base, predominantly 18 to 35 females, and 42% of the purchases on that platform is mostly baby-related products. Now, both Xiaohongshu.com and Kaola.com are mostly e-commerce related, where the agreement with Brelite as more of an exclusive distribution partner is more about their access to 2,000 mother and baby stores in China. Now, majority of these international deals are actually signed very close to the end of the financial year, so we don't really expect this to materialize till next financial year. However, the deals with Coles, Chemist Warehouse, and also Costco were signed earlier in the financial year, so we should see some improvements when it comes to domestic sales. So from 2016 to 2017, they posted an increase of 7% additional net revenue of $3.921 million and a net loss of approximately $5 million. Now in 2018, things are starting to heat up. Domestically, they've added Woolies as another distributor, and more importantly, in a span of 8 months, they secured an agreement with JD.com, Qianjia Wanpu, which is China's largest infant formula distributor, a 17 million minimum revenue commitment from Times New Asia, and also an agreement with Alibaba to launch Tmall flagship stores. Now, in the 2018 financial year, Bubs went through 2 rounds of capital raising a total of $55 million. Now, 15 million of that is going to be used towards acquiring NULAC Foods and 49.9% equity interest in the processing facility where NULAC Foods are produced. This is a very important plot point in Bubs Australia's vertical integration story, because by buying the facility and also NULAC Foods, you have now secured the raw materials that's required to make the infant formula. So you own the goats, you own the goat milk, and that means moving forward into the future, you're not fighting anyone for those raw materials, and the prices of those raw materials will be more likely to be predictable instead of fluctuating because of competition. Now, the remaining $40 million was raised on the 18th of January 2018 to support the ongoing growth efforts. Now, the strategic partnerships in the 2017 financial year is starting to materialize. Revenue as a group have tripled, sales in China have tripled as well, and 84% of the revenue is coming from Australia. Now, what's really interesting is that revenue increase haven't included the 17 million minimum revenue commitment from Times New Asia, because that deal was signed on June 2018. It's more likely that we'll see that part of the revenue to materialize in the 2019 financial year that I'll talk about in just a second. At the same time, Bubs is not profitable yet, posting a net loss of approximately $64 million. And I wanted to quickly make a note here that 48 million of that 64 is actually a non-cash impairment of goodwill on NULAC Foods. Fast forward to 2019, saying a lot has happened in 2019 is an understatement. With a 5-year agreement with Central Dairy Goats in New Zealand, Bubs is now a leading producer of Australian goat milk products, which also means they've secured additional raw materials for their supply chain to get ready to scale up their business. And now on top of that, the agreement with Tatura and also acquiring Deloraine Dairy now means Bubs have full visibility from raw material, which is goat milk, all the way to end product plus tinning.
Tinning as in putting the milk powder into the tin.
And Deloraine Dairy is one of 15 facilities in Australia who's authorized by the Chinese government to produce infant formulas to be imported into China. The Bingmei joint venture, along with the Deloraine Dairy acquisition, will ultimately fast-track Bubs' ability to receive SAMR, which is an approval process that will allow Bubs to sell infant formulas in retail outlets. Without that, you actually can't sell infant formulas in retail outlets, but you can still sell via digital means on e-commerce platforms. Now, on the distribution side, the Bingmei joint venture has yielded a very, very important milestone for Bubs, and that's the strategic partnership with Kids Want. Kids Want is the holy grail of mother and baby products, with 275 physical stores in 123 cities covering 60% of China's major cities. One more thing before we talk about numbers. Bubs have grown their product range from 18 SKUs to 29 SKUs. And what we should expect from this product expansion over the next couple of years is that customer lifetime value should increase, improving the profitability of Bubs moving forward as well. Okay, so let's talk about numbers. The deepened distribution channels, both domestically and internationally, have really started to kick in. And Bubs Australia's net revenue in the 2019 financial year have increased by 160%. On top of that, Bubs' focus on high margin products like infant formulas have translated in a 50% margin improvement. Now, this is really important because both revenue growth and margin growth are vital signs of the company's moving towards profitability. Because when a company moves towards profitability, it no longer have to rely on capital raising via the equity market. The banks will finally feel a lot more comfortable lending them money, knowing that they're not going to make a loss permanently and they can use that debt to grow faster in the future. Now, to finish off the story development segment, here's a few more things to note after the 2019 financial year up to this point. I'm very well aware that there are new supply agreements with Coles and Woolies and a bunch of other really important events, but honestly, I'm the most excited by Bubs launching into Vietnam. In the 2000s, the GDP per capita in Vietnam is approximately $390. And as the Chinese economy somewhat became wealthier, apparel companies like Nike decided to pull their manufacturing facilities from China to Vietnam because it's cheaper to do it in Vietnam at that point. Now, other companies soon follow suit. And because of that, the manufacturing sector in Vietnam has started to grow. Fast forward to today, Vietnam's GDP per capita is $3,000. This shift from extreme poverty to middle income happened in just 20 years, making this one of the fastest growing economy in history. So Bubs being able to move into Vietnam's largest mother and baby store is, in my opinion, another very vital plot point to their growth story. Because that plot point in their growth story will allow them to continue to build their brand across Southeast Asian cities, along with capitalizing on Vietnam's rocket economic growth sometime in the future. Let's talk about economic moat before I wrap up the video with whether I think Bubs has a chance against A2 moving forward into the future. Similar to my other videos, this part is very subjective, so take this with a grain of salt. In my humble opinion, Bubs have two distinct moats, and the first of which is their vertical integration. Being able to control your supply chain from farm gate all the way to production, tinning, and distribution, that will give Bubs the ability to scale up or down, allowing them to better deal with seasonal or raw material price fluctuations. Not to mention, having that kind of end-to-end supply chain infrastructure, that will give them a more superior level of quality control, and also the ability to explore or experiment with new product ranges much faster and much cheaper compared to other companies that are dependent on manufacturers or production facilities. Now, the second moat in Bubs is their deeply influential backing in key markets. In the last 3 financial years, the agreements and partnerships Bubs were able to sign, both domestically and in China, are a testament of how crucial that backing is. Without that, growing would take much longer, giving other competitors a chance to wither away your existing competitive advantage. So the last logical question is, given enough time, will Bubs be able to go head-to-head with A2 Milk in the future? Again, this part is really subjective, so make sure you take this with a grain of salt. Now, the growth story development so far for Bubs has been nothing but extraordinary. And with their economic moat, I am confident there is a lot more growth that's yet to come. And I think what Bubs ultimately have to overcome in order to go head-to-head with A2 are the following things. 1, Bubs need their SAMR approved to realize the full power of their strategic distribution partnerships, pushing infant formulas into retail, and that will have a flow-on brand effect on Chinese consumers, bringing more comfort around consuming Bubs products. 2nd, Bubs need to work on the adoption of the new product range to increase the probability of the customer lifecycle expansion. And by doing that, they should be able to improve the profitability of the business over the long term. 3rd, they need to maintain their domestic relationship with all the major retailers like Coles, Woolies, Chemist Warehouse, Costco to keep A2 on their toes. And finally, keep leveraging their expertise and also backing to move into international markets like Vietnam, where A2 is weak. So personally speaking, Bubs still got a long way to go, and A2's grip in both domestic market and international market is still very tight. And A2's exceptional management have made sure their products are always considered scarce and premium, which definitely have paid off in the Chinese market. At the end of the day, I'm optimistic about Bubs Australia. And I think that as long as they learn from Bellamy's mistake back in 2017 and keep tapping into their expertise and backing to penetrate international markets, I think the competition over the next couple of years will start to get pretty nervous. And that's essentially it on part 1 of a 2-part series on Bubs. If you want to follow this series, subscribe to my channel, click onto the bell so that I can let you know when that video is live. And as usual, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you gently smash that like button right there because that will really support me and also my channel. And until next time, my name is David. Otto will always do the honors and see you very soon.